Want to keep up with the latest LEGO Mega 96.1 videos? Make sure to subscribe and ring that bell. Hello everyone, LEGO Mega 96.1 here with another video. And welcome back to another On This Day in History. It was on this day in history, the Battle of Trenton occurred in Trenton, New Jersey on December 26, 1776. Now, if you read the many history books of the American Revolution, Trenton was barely mentioned in various forms of media. Now, in that battle, the United States, before we were the United States of America, we were known as the Continental Army, we fought against mercenaries from Germany called Hessians. Now, Hessians, as I said, they were German mercenary troops hired by the British to keep the American colonies under British rule. Now, mind you, before the United States was the United States, we were once 13 small British colonies. But after being taxed by the British without representation and the way the British handled things, we decided to band together and rebel against British rule, meaning we want to form our own nation and to govern ourselves. But we don't need a king or an emperor or dictator telling us what we can or can't do. But we are allowed to make our own choices. Now, the Revolution in particular, it was that example. Now, the American Revolution began on April 19th of 1775 in a place called Lexington, and later Concord. Hence the name of the battles of Lexington and Concord. And since then, we banded together to fight against the British, or the Redcoats, as the Continental Army called them. Now, we did take Boston from the British, but they came back, and they were reinforced by mercenaries, Hessians. Now, mercenaries, for those who don't know, these were guns for hire. Now, Hessians were these elite German soldiers who were hired by the British to fight against us. It was there that we suffered defeat after defeat as we pulled the British away from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That was the colonial capital at the time during the Revolution. Washington, D.C. wasn't around at the time. It came around after the Revolution. Now, Trenton, the history of Trenton began in the winter of 76. This was 6 months after the colonies declared independence from Britain and the crown itself. Now, even though we gained our independence, we still suffered defeat. Now, the guy that's leading the Continental Army is George Washington, which was the same guy who was on the $1 bill or the 25-cent coin. And he's also known as the father of our country, and he's a great leader. Now, maybe people thought he was incompetent because he was suffering defeat. Now, the tactics they used was known as hit-and-run tactics. Now, despite them standing and fighting, they still pulled back because many of the Continental soldiers feared one thing: the bayonet. But Washington knew that he had to strike back because come January of the new year during the Revolution, many of the Continental soldiers were going to go home, and that would be it. Because the Continental soldiers at the time had 1-year enlistments. They had to serve for 1 year, then boom, they're gone. Now, during the Revolution, the Continental Army was in poor shape. Many of these guys lacked clothing, they lacked equipment, and many of them suffered from wounds from previous battles. And even exposure from summer heat and winter cold. So what happened was they decided to attack the British to, not the British, the Hessians, to boost American morale, to get the enlistments rolling. Now, many of you remember the name Thomas Paine. Now, he written a pamphlet called The American Crisis, and this was written prior to the Battle of Trenton. Now, the crossing of the Delaware River occurred on Christmas Day, December 25th, 1776. Now, even though we did win the battle, there were a lot of misconceptions linking due to that particular battle and the aftermath. Well, many of you remember this painting, which you've seen in many history books as well as museums. Well, that is a misconception, meaning something like this can't be true. Not to burst anyone's bubble, but in truth, Washington wasn't standing during the crossing of the Delaware River. In other words, he was sitting in the boats, hunched over to keep himself warm from the cold. If he was standing, he would have tipped the boat over, and those in the boat would have either freeze to death or drowned. Because that water, and not to quote Jack Dawson from Titanic, it hits you like 1,000 knives stabbing you all over your body. You can't breathe, can't think, you don't feel anything but the pain. Now, Washington was 44 years old at the time of the battle, although the painting had him depicted as older than that. And now, a little pro tip, those boats that were used during the crossing, they were known as Durham boats. They weren't the boats that were depicted in Washington crossing the Delaware painting. And they were 40 to 60 feet long, 8 feet wide, and weighed up to 4,600 pounds if weighed. And that's true. Now, many people thought the Hessians were drunk during the battle. That isn't true. And I'm actually quoting some of the actual myths that's from the Washington Crossing Park website. Now, the commander of the Hessian forces there was a man named Johann Rall. Now, even though he was there, he would be wounded during the battle, and he would die of his injuries. He would be 2,300 Hessians that was killed during the battle. Oh, and many of you don't know this yet, but the 5th President of the United States, James Monroe, was there. He served as a lieutenant of the 3rd Virginia Infantry. And in that battle, he was wounded. And the artery in the wound was severed. And he was saved because if he wasn't, he would have died right there or on the battlefield of Trenton. Now, as for the Continental Army, they did suffer 2 casualties, but it was during the march, not to the battle. Now, even though there were like a couple hundred guys that were wounded in the battle, it was not less bloodshed, but more of a battle. Now, many of you have seen the movie called The Crossing. Now, even though the movie is good and I've seen it before, there were a lot of historical inaccuracies linking to the battle and even towards the crossing itself. Now, as I said, many of you have seen a painting of Washington standing on a boat while crossing the Delaware River. Now, as I said, Washington wasn't standing during the crossing. No, he wasn't standing on the boat. He was sitting in the boat, hunched over to protect himself from the cold. Facts are real, folks. Look it up. So after the Hessians were defeated at Trenton, and American morale was boosted. Enlistments poured in and even kept the guys in the army for, let's say, another year or so. Now, I myself have never been to Trenton, New Jersey. I mean, I want to, and I think I might have been up to the Washington Crossing Park. I just been up near the area where the Continental Army was crossing the Delaware River. Oh, and another thing, Washington didn't cross the Potomac River, he crossed the Delaware. Now, mind you, his army was in Pennsylvania attempting to cross New Jersey. If he did cross the Potomac, then how could he teleport from Virginia all the way to Pennsylvania? Think about it. And I know what you're thinking. If they were going to cross the Delaware, why didn't they cross the bridge that was built there? Well, that bridge wasn't built during the Revolution. It was built sometime after. It's true. But still, I did watch the movie The Crossing. It starred Jeff Daniels as Washington, and even though his performance in the movie is good, which I'm not gonna lie, he did well as Chamberlain in Gettysburg and Gods and Generals. But I think this was the best role for him, and even though it tried to humanize Washington, it does show he is a great leader. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video, my friends. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like this, including the many other videos that I've done on my channel, please feel free to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to my channel, and turn on the bell notifications so that way you can be notified when I upload the next video. And as always, this is Lego Mega 96 1 signing off.